Hi, this is Christine and welcome to Scrap and Rabbit. It's been a while since I posted a new video. I've been away and haven't had much time to spend in my craft room, so I decided to offer for free on my YouTube channel one of the tutorials that I normally sell on my website and on Etsy. Like the other tutorials that I sell, this one includes a series of videos as well as the written instructions with lots of photos that take you from start to finish. The reason I include written instructions along with my video tutorials is because after seeing a video once, you can simply refer to the written instructions for future albums, but the videos are still available if you prefer working that way. I'm including below in the description of this video the links to my other albums that I've made based on this tutorial. Pictures of these albums are also shown in this introduction. Also below you will find a link so that you can download the written tutorial from my website, as well as links to each of the videos in the tutorial. The written instructions include a quick list of supplies used to make the album. Now for those of you who have already purchased this tutorial, email me at scrapandrabbit@gmail.com or contact me through YouTube and I will be happy to send you another tutorial to replace this free one that you've already purchased. A link to my other tutorials available in my Etsy shop is included below as well, so you can choose from one of those. So once you're ready, let's get started. I'm going to take you step by step as we construct a new album. The album that appears in your tutorial, I'm afraid I don't have that album anymore. I sold it when I put it up on eBay. So I'm going to use this one as a demonstration. This is a little baby album. I did this with the Die Cuts with a View Baby Girl stack. Now the album that I'm actually going to create today is, again, Die Cuts with a View, but I'm using the baby boy stack. But it's going to be made the same as this album here. So I'm just going to take you through the album quickly. On the cover, there's a waterfall. Here. The side of the album is stitched together, and I put some beads in there as I was stitching the album, so we're going to go over that. The front is tied with the ribbon that loops through these little eyelets. And there's a partial cover on the right. And there's a hard spine on the right as well. The back of my album is plain. I just put a little die cut there for journaling or to put a date. So you open the album. The album has 8 pages, and the pages measure 7.5 by 5.5 inches wide. In my directions, in my tutorial, I always give the measurements in the same order, and I do that by height, by width, just so that you don't get confused when you're cutting your paper, so you don't cut it on the wrong side. So it's always the same measurement, height by width. In this album, each page has a flap and a tag. Alternating pages have a flap that opens on the side, and there's a tag inside the hidden pocket. So there's 4 of those. Now the other pages also have a flap and tag. The flap folds up. I don't know if I'm in frame. And the pocket is in the side of the page. Now, I usually do my pockets two-sided, and I mean my tags two-sided, but you can do them single-sided if you want. There's one, there's the second one, the third, and the fourth. And they all have tags in the side pocket. The left part of the page is just left blank, and that way you can put a large photo on there. Okay. Now the way the album is constructed, this cover is attached to a piece of cardstock which is made the same as the other pages, as your base pages, is attached to that piece. Now this piece is stitched into the album, so it's all held together. So you start by making all of your main pages, your base pages, including the piece that will be the inside cover liner. And then after you've done that, then you make your covers and you attach them to your cover liners. Now the back is the same. There's a cover liner here that this page attaches to, and there's a spine on the side, on the right hand side, and there's this little partial front cover here. This is made out of 3 pieces of chipboard, and I'll show you how to do that as well. So I guess we can move on to the next video, and we're going to start making the album. We're going to start by making our inside cover liners and the base pages, and those are all made the same way. Now before we start, what I would recommend is you watch the video first, and then you can follow along in your book as you're creating the pages. So let's get started. Here's another album I made based on the same design, except the cover is a bit different. Now there are 8 base pages, which are these things here. It's actually these pages here, and the flaps are attached to the base pages. There's 8 of them. There's also 2 inside cover liners, and that's on the white cardstock that you see here, and the covers are glued to those inside cover liners, but they're made the same way as these pages. For my inside cover liners, I'm going to use regular cardstock in this teal color. And for my inside pages, I'm going to go ahead and use pre-printed cardstock. So let's start with the cover liners. If you can use pre-printed cardstock for your cover liners too if you prefer. But I'm going to use this because I might decide later on or not if I want to go ahead and cover the cardstock with designer paper. So what I do is I lay my 8.5 by 11 piece of paper down on the 11-inch side, and I score at 1/2 inch right in the center. Turn it over, and on the 8.5-inch side I score at 1/2 inch and 8 inches. So now I'm going to fold along the long edge on the score line so that the score line is a little bit easier to see. On the front of my page, which is this side here, I'm going to remove these sections of the hinges because I'm not going to need those. Here's the front, what's going to be the front of my page, in this case the front of my cover liner. So now I'm going to cut these little ends here at the diagonal, and that's just going to make it easier when I go to fold my cover. Diagonal here and here. Now this is eventually going to close by folding in the hinges and the front cover like that. But I'm not going to adhere it yet because I'm going to have to work with this open as I'm stitching. But I'm just going to go ahead and apply my 2-sided tape, and it'll be ready for later. I'm using very narrow 2-sided tape, so I'm putting 2 strips. If you're using wider tape, 1 strip should be sufficient.
So my first inside cover liner is done. You can go ahead and do your other one. I'm going to do mine later. Now, I'm not going to do all of the pages so that you don't have to watch me do the whole thing. The ones that are repetitious, you can just go ahead and do yourself after. And I'll do mine as well while I'm not on video. So now I'm going to do my first page. And for my first page, I'm using my pre-printed cardstock. I've cut it to 8.5 by 11. Actually, I don't need this now. And I'm going to go ahead and score it the same way as I did the cover ones because they're all made the same. So I score 5.5 inches on the 11-inch side. Turn over, and I scored 5 inches. And again at 8 inches. Okay. Now I do the same thing. I'm going to fold this just so that my score line is more visible. Oh, this cardstock is thick. Okay. Now I'm going to trim the hinge off the front of my page. I actually can't really see where the center is. Trim my ends diagonally. And I'm going to apply my tape. Score this very well. So this is how my page is going to form, but again, I'm not going to remove the tape because I'm going to need this open when I'm stitching. So now what we're going to do is we're going to create the right hand flap. And that's going to be for pages 1, 3, 5, and 7. The other alternating pages have a flap that fold down. But this flap opens up and there's a hidden pocket with a tag in it. So we're going to be doing this page. I've already cut my paper excuse me, so that it measures 7 7/16 of an inch high by 5.5 wide. And the reason that it's 7 7/16 inches is so that it's not exactly the same size as this page here, because my flap will have to fit in here. And if it's a little bit too long, it's going to bulge like that. I don't know if you can see that when I try to insert, because this flap will fit in there and fold over. So this is a little bit too long, so I'm going to go ahead and trim it. Just remove the 16th here. And now you can see that it's going to fit no problem in there. So I'm going to before I do my right flap, my base pages here, I want to find the center so that I can cut a little opening that'll make it easier to remove the tag. And I can just do that by measuring. My page is 7.5 inches tall. So that would be 3 3/4 for the center. So I just put a mark there. This is on the front of the page. Then I take my circle punch and I punch about 1/3 of the way through on my circle punch. There we go. I have this little gap there that's going to make it easier to remove the tag. Back to my right folding flap. On the edge of my paper, I'm going to punch a design. Now my design already fits because I suited the measurements to fit my punches. Now you're going to be using probably different punches. So you can go ahead and adjust the length of your flap so that it suits your design better. Here what I would do is I have a beginning of a scallop, and it doesn't quite, my last scallop doesn't quite fit in. So what I can do is either adjust it so that my scallops will be even on each side. Okay, I'll have to fix it so that it's about 1/8 on each side. It's going to trim a bit of my scallop off. Or if I want a full scallop, I can start punching at the very edge and then cut my flap here so that the scallop fits. And then the flap will be a little bit shorter, but it still works. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and punch my design. Now I'm doing this a little bit in reverse here. It doesn't really matter, but I forgot to score my hinge, so I'm going to go ahead and do that now. Okay, on the 5.5 inch side, I'm going to put it this way. I want my hinge on the right. I'm going to score at the 5 inch mark, and that's going to form my hinge. And I apply my two-sided tape. So I'm ready to add my flap to my page. The tape slide down will be attached to the back, inside back of the page, like so. Now the easiest way to do that is to just put your flap in front of the front page, and you fold the hinge down with the tape side down, and then when you remove the tape, it'll stick to the inside back of your page. So I'm going to go ahead and do that and make sure that it's well centered and it fits inside of my two hinges, this side and that side, like that. There we go. So my flap is attached, and this will fold down like so, and my flap is attached to the page, and my tag will slide on the inside. But again, we're not going to tape this shut because we're going to need to have it open as we're working with our stitching. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to mat both sides of my tag. The way I do my matting, I don't measure. Those of you who already have my previous video, I went through that procedure for matting, and I don't measure, I just eyeball it. I'm taking my piece of cardstock, or my piece of paper. I'm using my cardstock, but you can use paper. And I set it about 1/8 of an inch all around because I want my cardstock to peek through. So I just use a pen and I just mark it about 1/8 of an inch from the top. And here, 1/8 of an inch from the right, and just 1/8 of an inch just before my design, like that. So I'm going to cut on those lines. Okay, so there's my piece. Now that's going to attach to my flap like so. So I'm going to go ahead and tape that on my piece. What I do when I'm matting is, some people like using the tape guns, and I find I would be going through so much tape if I tape all around my edges. So what I do is I just tape my corners down. It's easier to see on the black table. I tape my corners down, and I remove the backing of the tape. And then I apply my glue stick to the edges where the tape isn't there, and also to the center. And then I go ahead and position it so that my cardstock peeks through at that 1/8 of an inch. Actually, it looks more like 1/16 of an inch, but it does a nice little border around the edge. So what I would do is I would also mat the inside the same way. If you're using plain cardstock for all of your pages, you can go ahead and mat your cardstock with your pre-printed paper once it's been assembled. If you are going to use add pre-printed paper on top of your plain cardstock to make your pages, you might want to do it before you go ahead and punch this little circle out. Or you can always just mat it and then just go back over with your punch and just cut it out again. Or you can just have your matting go up to an edge here if you want. It's however you prefer to do it. I like using the pre-printed cardstock because I don't have to go back and mat all of the pages afterwards. But it's entirely up to you. So our first page is completed. go ahead and do all 4 of those pages, 1, 3, 5, and 7. And in the meantime, I'm going to get my stuff ready and we'll do the second page with the flap that folds up. Before I get started on page 2, I forgot to show you my tag. I went ahead and cut my tag and I rounded the corners using my corner rounder, and I matted the tag. And as you see, once the pages are adhered together, the tag fits perfectly in and my page closes. So that's it for page 1. Pages 2, 4, 6, and 8 are made the same, and they have a flap that folds up. So it's basically the same procedure as before, only your flap will be attached to the side of the page and it's punched at the other end. In this page, the tag will fit in the inside pocket that's going to be formed once your page is assembled. So we'll go ahead and do page 2. I've already gone ahead and I used my pre-printed cardstock and I cut my page, cut the hinge, and I've applied the tape to the hinge so my page will be ready to assemble. And now I need to apply my flap that folds down on the front of the page. So what I'm going to do, on the 7-inch side across, I score at 1/2 to form a hinge. Always use your bone folder after scoring. You get nice crisp folds. Now I apply my 2-sided tape to the hinge. Now I punch a decorative border on the other end. Again, if your border doesn't fit quite right on the edge, go ahead and trim your flap so that it suits your border. So, with the tape side down, I'm going to insert my hinge behind the top of the front page, and I'm going to make sure that it's well centered, like that. So now, I remove my tape. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to mat my front and back of my flap. This is cute paper. So again, to mat, I just position my paper about 1/8 of an inch from the left, and I mark 1/8 of an inch from the right, and then the same thing, top to bottom. Like that. go. And then I would do the same thing to the inside of my tag, of my flap. Now I've already gone ahead and prepared my tag that's going to fit in here. I've cut my paper to size, and that's 7.5 inches high by 5 3/4 wide. I've rounded the corners of my tag, and I've punched a decorative border on the right edge. Now when this page is assembled, like that, this tag is going to fit in, and it's going to stick out a little bit to the right so that you can see the decorative edge. So go ahead and do the rest of your pages 2, 4, 6, and 8, and then we're going to move on to the binding. Now, to get ready to do my binding, I'm going to need a few things. Scrap of paper that's 7.5 inches high by 1 inches wide approximately, and that's so that it fits the same height as my pages. Then I need 3 pieces of seam binding or sturdy ribbon that measure about 7 to 8 inches long. Mine is a little bit short. It'll make it a bit harder to work with, but I'll manage with that. And then you need some beads that you're going to add to the spine of your binding. The front cover liner, which is this first piece that you see here, doesn't have beads on it. I only start adding beads to the inside pages. In this case, what I did for this album is I used plain cardstock to make all my base pages, and I just matted each base page with my pre-printed paper. Okay, so all of my pages here on the side will look white because I'm not using the pre-printed cardstock. But the first page, which is the inside cover liner, and the last one, which is the back inside cover liner, they're not going to have beads on them. Just the inside pages, and they go on at intervals on page 1, 3, 5, and 7. Okay? Now, you want to figure out how many pages you're going to need. There will be 3 strings of beads to each page. So there's 1, 2, and 3 strings of beads. Now to calculate how many beads you're going to need, you multiply 4, which is the number of pages that will have beads, by 3 for the strings of beads on each page, and then by the number of beads that will fit on your string. Now your string is done by wrapping your ribbon around your stack of pages, and this is where your beads will be attached across the ribbon. Now my ribbon is 3/4 inches wide, and my beads are about 1/4 inch each. So I can fit 3 beads on the width of my ribbon. So I'm going to use these for my baby boy theme. If I place my beads here, I can see I can fit 3 beads across my ribbon. So then to calculate how many beads I'm going to need, I'm going to need 4 multiplied by 3 strings is 12, and multiply that by 3 beads per string is 36. So I need a total of 36 beads. Now, I'm going to use this strip of paper as a template that will show me where I'm going to punch the holes in my pages before I can begin stitching my pages together. And also this template will show me where the beads will fit on the pages. So I start by folding the strip of paper in 2, and then I fold again in 2. So this gives me 3 creases along my paper. what I do is I take my strip of ribbon and I place it centered over the middle crease, like this. And then, with my pen, I mark each side of the ribbon. Next, I take another ribbon, or I can use the same one, but the right edge of the ribbon will be along the left crease. And again, I'm going to mark on the right side of my ribbon, which will be right in the crease, and then on the left. And then, for the right, I place the left edge of my ribbon along the right crease. I mark on the crease and on the right edge of my ribbon. Then, once that's done, I make another mark 2 inches away from each end. And I don't have my ruler handy, so I'll just eyeball that one. About 2 inches, about half an inch from each end. Okay, so this is going to show me where I'm going to punch holes and I'm going to be threading my needle through. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with my cover liner in the front. And I'm going to take my strip of paper and I'm going to line it up with the crease so that the marks are on the inside. I'm going to use my needle and punch the holes right in the crease where the lines appear. I don't know if you can see that. Now, I'm going to use this inside cover liner as a template for all of the rest of my other pages so I can punch the holes through. So I'm going to take my first page. I've put my pages in order and I've alternated right folding flap, top folding flap. Right, and so I'm ready and they're all in the right order. So open out your flap. I'm going to take this inside liner and I'm going to just fit it inside here, and I'm going to use it as the template for punching my holes. You want them punched very accurately, because if your holes are off on one page, then your page won't be straight when you bind it. So there's my first page. And then I do the next one. So I'm not going to do all of them on video. I'll show you when I get to my back cover liner. Again, it's the same thing. Punch So you would do all of your pages like that. Okay, I'll finish doing mine off video. Now, before we begin stitching, very important, you want to make sure that your needle is going to fit your bead. Even if it looks like it's going to fit, check it to make sure. Because I found out the hard way, sometimes I've started stitching my page and then when I go to put the bead on, it doesn't fit and I have to undo the whole thing. So just make sure it fits through. Now this needle, here I can see it doesn't fit. I'm going to have to use a smaller one. So I've got this smaller one that I'll be using to do the stitching on my page. Okay, so finish punching the holes in your pages and then we'll get working on the actual stitching. And I'm going to use my thread. This is a nice thick thread that I'm going to use. You can also use embroidery floss. So I'm going to go ahead and thread my needle off video because that part usually takes me a while to do. So I'll see you soon. I lowered the camera a bit, so I hope you can see this part a bit better because we'll be doing fine work, detail work. Okay. I use 2 layers of thread. My beads are falling all over the place. I use a double layer of thread when I'm stitching my page. Okay, and also as you're stitching, you're not going to want to pull too hard because you don't want to rip these holes in your pages, but you also want the thread fairly taut, but you don't want it to rip the holes. Now when I'm stitching, I'm going to refer to these cover liners and the pages as rows. So the cover liner, the first one will be row 1, and then page 1 will be row 2, row 3, row 4, row 5, 6, 7, 8, row 9 for the last page, and then row 10 for the last cover liner. That makes it a lot easier to follow the instructions. And also the holes, I'm going to refer to them as from top to bottom 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So row 1, hole 1 would be the first hole on this page here. Now, when in the instructions, when I say out row 1, or out hole 1, out means you're working from the inside of your page and you're going to stitch out. In means from the outside of your page, you're going to be stitching into the inside. And I'll show you how I do that. Now, what you should do first is get all of your pages in order so that you don't get mixed up when you stitch them, because you don't want to have to undo everything. So it's right flap, top flap, right flap, top flap, okay, and so on. So in my example, when I say row 1, out hole 2, in hole 3, it means row 1, the first page, which is in this case is my liner. I would go out hole 2 and then back in hole 1. Like that. Okay? That's the example I have in the book. So basically what we're going to do is we're going to start by stitching the pages together at the end. So this will be attached to this page at this end, and then this one will be attached at the top end, and this will be attached at the bottom end. After that's done, we're going to come back and we're going to stitch so that all of the ends of the pages are tied together. So you'll see how that works as we follow along in the instructions. So you've got your paper stacked, and you're going to start with your first piece. So thread your needle, and we're going to start stitching the album. Work with as long a piece of thread as you can comfortably. The hardest part, I find, is trying to prevent the thread from twisting and forming knots, especially if your thread is long. It's better to work with shorter pieces comfortably, and then you can always attach additional pieces, and I'll show you how to do that. So we're going to start with row 1, which is my inside cover liner. So I put my needle out hole 2, the second hole, and I pull it through, and I leave about 3 to 4 inches, maybe 3 inches, a tail, so that I'll be able to tie a knot with this. On the outside, I lay my first strip of ribbon across the 2 holes, not the first 2, but the second and the third one. I lay my ribbon across here, and I go in hole 3. Again, you want to work very slowly. Oops, I just pulled too hard. Let me just do that again. You want to work slowly so that your thread doesn't get tangled. Okay, so I've got my thread on the outside of my ribbon, and now I'm going to tie a knot on the inside just to get this started. I'm a little bit clumsy doing this. That's why it takes me a long time to do it. It's better to go slow. Okay. So now my first ribbon is attached. What I'm going to do is put a piece of tape across it so that it holds in place and I don't keep losing it. There. Okay, so now the next one is out hole 4. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4. This is my 4th hole. Lay another piece of ribbon on top, just below my stitching, and I go in hole 5. And I secure this ribbon with a piece of tape. Then I go out hole 6, put my 3rd piece of ribbon, in hole 7, and I take my last piece of ribbon down. Now, all my 3 ribbons are attached. I go out hole 8. Okay, so this is what it looks like. I'm now ready to attach my next page. Now for my next page, which is row 2, which is actually page 1, open it. I'm going to be working from the bottom of the page, working my way back up the top as I attach it to this row 1 page. So what I do is I open up my page, my thread is sticking out of the first row. I'm going to go in row 2 in hole number 8. Like so. So now my page is going to be attached to the inside cover liner, like that. Then I go out hole 7, now this row 2, has beads in it. So I'm going to add my beads. This is where it's frustrating if you suddenly realize that your needle doesn't fit through your beads. You have to start over. So I'm using little round beads, little beads that look like blocks, since this is a baby album. Okay, so I've added my 3 beads, cross over the ribbon, and I go in hole 6. Now this is on my row 2 page here, not in hole 6 of the cover liner, in hole 6 of my second row that I just attached. So at first it's a little bit tricky. But then after a while you'll get the hang of it. Now this is where you don't want your thread to get twisted up. Okay, so that's what it's going to look like. My beads are attached to this page. Now I go out hole 5, again I add my beads because there are beads on this row. Cross over the ribbon and in hole 4. Out hole 3, add my bead, put a yellow one on. And I'm going in hole 2 on row 2. Like that. Then I go out hole 1 on row 2, and I'm ready to add my next row. Now you'll notice that this is tied at this end, but it's not tied at this end, and I'm going to keep working, adding my pages underneath. At the very end, I'm going to come back and I'm going to be doing some stitching to tie together all of these loose pages. But for now, I keep working my way down. So I take my next page, and it's going to fit underneath row 2, and that's going to become my row 3. Now row 3 doesn't have any beads in it. And the reason that not all the pages have beads is because it would get too bulky with the beads and you'd have a gap in between the pages. By alternating, at least it gives you a bit of room for the beads. So I'm going to add my row 3. And I go in hole 1. Whoops, I'm getting a knot here. I don't want that. Out hole 2. Go over my ribbon. Hard to see. Okay, there's my hole. In hole 3, out hole 4, the flaps are hard to control. There we go. And in hole 5, I should have made my holes a little bit bigger so it would be easier to see. Okay. Now I'm running short on thread, so this is a good point to show you how to add additional thread. You don't want to tie your thread when you're on the outside because that's going to be visible and you don't want to tie knots there. So what you're going to do is you're going to tie your knot on the inside while you're at one of these longer edges here. So what I'm going to do, cut my thread, add a new longer piece. Now I hope I can get this in there without making you all wait too long. Here, that wasn't too bad. Okay. Now I'm going to tie my knot so that it meets before the next hole, because I don't want, I'll show you what I mean here. Let me just tie this on. It's a bit too long. very good at knots either. Okay, I want my knot to be as close to my previous hole as possible, so that when this reaches my next hole, which is there, it's not going to prevent, the knot is not going to prevent my thread from going through. So I want it to be as close to the base of the previous hole as possible. Now I can go out. There, and that just fits in there. So I continue stitching. I think this is the most time-consuming part of the album, so you want to do it very carefully. It's not my most fun part. I don't really like doing this part. Okay, now I'm ready to attach my next page. I'm on to row 4. So again, row 4, I'm going to be working the same as I did for row 2. I'm going to from the bottom and work my way up, and I'm going to be adding beads. I open my page. Add my beads. Oh, this bead doesn't want to fit through my needle. I'll have to replace it with another one. Okay. Across my ribbon. Add beads. and I go out hole 1. These ribbons are what's actually going to be holding all your pages together too. So now I go on to my next row, and that row doesn't have beads. I go in hole 1. Out hole 2, over the ribbon, and in hole 3. It seems like if my thread can catch on something, it will. Out hole 4. Over the ribbon, in hole 5, out hole 6. Yep. Okay, well, continue adding your pages, and I'll come back when I'm stitching in my back liner.